to a little bit sloppily in the questions. With this qualitative study, this is really our way of, I probably should have said when I first presented it, of just trying to get a sense of what people's daily lives are like, and also how easy it is to research this population. Can we follow them? Can we keep track of them? Will they stay in the study? And what things do we see here that we can't necessarily pick up in the administrative data? So this is sort of very much kind of an open-ended exercise in trying to give us as researchers the ability to interpret other things that we're finding in the administrative data. The administrative data component is really focused on this issue of social contexts and how that affects employment, substance use, and recidivism. So the two social contexts being the neighborhood environment that people are in and the living arrangements, sort of where they live, whether it's a household on their own or in an institutional setting, and what the associations are between the characteristics of the neighborhoods and the households and the outcomes.
So I sense that when you're doing that, I mean, there's a lot of research to already suggest that the correlative aspects of social environment and different relationship factors, and we know what leads to recidivism for the most part. So are you looking to, by viewing and peering into their lives, looking at all these extraneous variables, more specific things, such as front of the court issues, such as work retention, work habits, things of that nature? Are you looking for more specific branches within categories of things that we, research has already bared out?
I have something to say, but do you want to?
Yeah, I would say that's that's an accurate description. In a sense, this is kind of exploratory to see, if we kind of really study people's lives in more depth than we can with sort of numerical data, what becomes important, and then that will suggest either hypotheses to look at in numerical data or other studies that we should do starting new with new data from somewhere else or additional data from MDOC.
I would agree with that, but I also would quibble a little bit with the premise of the question that we already know much about recidivism. The summary that I gave, was very, it revealed a lot that we do know, but it comes mainly from evaluations of small-scale programs. There's very little large-scale population-based research on recidivism, and none that we know of that actually covers like an entire state like this. And also none that really tries to collect geographic information and look more at the neighborhood and the family context in which people are living. So the danger is, on the one hand, this is not a randomized trial. We don't have very clean tests of hypotheses because we have what we call observational or non-experimental data, and we're stuck making a lot of correlative statements. But there are ways of trying to do the best job that you can with the data that you have, and I think that there's a danger in research also of going too far in only privileging like experimental results, and I think that there's still a really important role for studies that go out there and collect the data that nobody else has and looks at a descriptive, looks at the big picture descriptively and looks for associations that could later then be tested. In this case, our original motivation, our niche, so to speak, was the neighborhood environment. And in part because I think there's a real disconnect between what the conventional wisdom is, probably for many people in this room, where you would say, of course, where you go after prison is going to make a difference. And if you move back to your old drug-infested neighborhood in a central city, maybe you're going to be walking, out of the frying pan back into the fire. On the other hand, and this is a slide that I forgot to show or just kind of ran out of time, there's a high degree of cynicism in the research world about those kinds of statements, in part because they're not based on experimental work, and the few attempts to kind of test these things experimentally haven't panned out very well, and some would argue that they're not really well designed to test those kinds of hypotheses to begin with. So that was kind of our entree into it, and we still think that that's a very valuable policy lesson because we'll be able to put a number on it at the end of the day, too, to figure out if the conventional wisdom is right, and if it is right, how big of an effect is there? And then, like you said, to kind of plow deeper and say, well, what is it about the neighborhoods? And what is it about the family environment and the kinds of particular life situations that they're facing. So it's a kind of a two-stage process, and right now we're still at the first stage. Yeah. I'm sorry, you and then. Yeah.
I have a suggestion. I am one of the moms on the front line. My son has been a habitual repeater, and I could give you all kinds of information, what goes on the inside of the prison and what happens on the outside. As far as this mom on the knowing what goes on the inside is, the systems helps create them. And if I would have this say, I'd say let's ask the moms. I have a group of mothers who we've all been through it. It isn't, you keep talking about the poor poverty. I didn't live in the poverty world. I lived on the lake in Central America in Lake Orion, and we weren't the poverty row, and we didn't have it any different than the poverty row people. Problems are problems no matter what, because I'm in a profession where I take care of the people who supposedly have money, and they have the same problems that all these poverty people you're talking about. And the only difference between the problem on the inside, the difference between the drug issue on the outside where they got caught and thrown in is the price of the drugs. Because drugs are available inside the prison as well. Because when they first put my son in, who turned himself in. You know, I have my real issue with what the system is doing and what the police system is all about, because I could testify to things that they don't even want you to know about. And we gotta get truth on, because this is our state, these are our kids, and this is our society. And we've got a third world war going on, and that's the drug war, because 1/3, according to all the research I get, of our budget goes into this deal. And we're not turning out better people, we're turning out sicker people, because it isn't good what's happening, okay? And what is causing these young men to go back? Is it the new laws that they're implementing on them than they was before? That's why they're going back? I do know why these young men have cycles to them. If you want to study something, study their cycles. The emotional state of them is a cycle. It's cyclical. It's a mental illness. I have studied mental illness because of what's happening in my family, and they're going about it all wrong. The first time they threw my son in maximum security because he supposedly did something, he was getting, don't worry about me, Mom, he was getting drunk and high in Oakland County maximum security jail. So I have my issues about what the system is doing with these young people. He was in a program where he was leading. We were rehabbing houses, and we were working with work release. Okay, that's another story I'd like to give testimony to. All right, and I was running a crew of these guys. Okay, and you got a lot of talented people in there, and they're using these guys. Big companies are using the the resources of these guys, and they're putting them in because you used my son, Salvation used my son to rehab their whole big project over there. So they're utilizing the talents of these kids, and they're not honoring them. Instead of being given the job, I'm getting upset because this system, what's going on, isn't good for our citizens and our state, and we got to get real about what's happening and going on, because I work with too many of the people, and there's an underground going on of mothers who are making sure their kids are being taken care of.
I think those are all well taken points. I just wanted to say that, you know, I think another kind of new frontier of the research would be to try to really look at the collateral damage that's caused by the prison boom, and that means going and talking to the other family members of people who have been sent to prison, and look at the financial hardships that they're encountering as a result. I mean, we see, despite the focus that we have on our primary offenders that we're studying in the qualitative study, you can't help but get wrapped up in the lives of their family members as well, and you hear a lot of stories about them, and some of those stories are just really awful, and in some cases harder on the spouse than the person who's actually spending time in prison.
And you know, I would say your points about drug abuse, addiction, mental illness are all right on. I mean, if we think about, you know, what is different now than it was 30 years ago before the prison boom, is that we are locking up a lot more people who are mentally ill and drug addicted, and that's our way of dealing with those social problems, and it's not a very productive one. you know, for people who haven't been in a prison before, it's a pretty horrible place, and it's even worse if you're.
There's a place in Oakland County where they don't have rights, they don't even get a phone.